The phone rang just as the sun began to sink behind the Arizona desert, painting the sky in soft gold. I hadn't changed my black dress since yesterday. My hands still carried traces of soil from the grave I'd filled myself. My son's grave. Jenny, we need to settle that trust money. Patricia's wedding is coming up soon. Stop being selfish. My mother's voice sliced through the silence like a sharp blade. I took a slow breath, my eyes drifting toward the small dinosaur poster still pinned above Tyler's empty bed. I understand, I said quietly, my tone so calm it startled even me. My name is Jennifer Blake, and 2 days ago, I buried my 9-year-old son, Tyler. I did it alone. While I stood in the cemetery, lowering his small casket into the ground, my parents and sister were across town hosting Patricia's engagement celebration. They knew about the funeral. They just didn't care enough to come. There was a long pause on the line. Then Mom spoke again, her voice chipper, almost rehearsed. Good. Patricia needs $12,000 for the catering deposit. Since you're in charge of Tyler's estate, you can just write the check. Tyler's trust fund. $50,000 set aside by my late husband's family after his car accident. It was meant for Tyler's future, his education, maybe his first home. Never once had I touched a penny. But now my family saw it as easy money. The lawyer needs a few days to process the paperwork, I replied, keeping my voice even. Days? Jenny, the venue needs payment by Friday. Can't you just front it from your account and reimburse yourself later? I could still hear her words from a week ago when I begged them to postpone Patricia's party, just one day, so they could attend Tyler's funeral. Mom had said, "Sweetheart, Tyler wouldn't want us to be sad. He'd want us to celebrate family joy." Family joy. The phrase echoed in my mind as I remembered shoveling dirt with my own hands because the funeral staff had already left. I forced my voice steady. I'll take care of it. Perfect, Mom said cheerfully. And Jennifer, try to think positive. Patricia's wedding will help us all move forward. When the call ended, the house was silent again. I walked into Tyler's room, where a stuffed triceratops sat waiting, and whispered, "We'll make sure they never touch your money." But I already knew what I had done with it, something none of them were expecting. Tomorrow, I would sit across from them at dinner and watch their faces when they learned the truth. The next evening, I drove toward my parents' house in Scottsdale. The city lights blurred through my windshield as I passed the cemetery, the same place where I'd said my final goodbye to Tyler just days ago. I slowed down briefly, whispering a silent promise to him before driving on. When I pulled into their driveway, everything looked exactly as it always had: manicured lawn, polished cars, a house that screamed perfection. But standing there, I could feel the rot beneath the shine. Dad opened the door before I could knock, smiling like nothing had ever happened. "Jennifer, sweetheart, we're so glad you came. Your mother made your favorite, roast beef and mashed potatoes." My favorite. As if a meal could erase the fact that they had skipped their grandson's funeral. Inside, the dining table was set with Mom's best china. Candles flickered softly. Across from me sat Patricia and her fiancé, Daniel, a real estate agent with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Patricia looked radiant, her diamond ring sparkling as she waved. "There you are," she said, jumping up to hug me. "I'm so sorry about I wanted to be there, but the florist appointment was impossible to reschedule." I stared at her, wondering how someone could say that without shame. Mom emerged from the kitchen, cheerful as ever. "We thought tonight would help us all heal. After all, life has to go on." Dad nodded, slicing into his roast. "Your mother mentioned you're being very generous with the trust fund. That's admirable, Jenny." I sipped my water slowly. "Generous?" Patricia leaned forward eagerly. "Well, yes. You're using Tyler's fund to help with the wedding, right? I was thinking maybe we could honor him at the ceremony. Like a small photo table or something sentimental. Not too sad, though." A photo table. That was their idea of honoring him. "Actually," I said carefully, "I've already made arrangements for the trust fund." "Oh, good." Patricia clapped. "That means we can finally book the band I love. They're expensive, but worth it." I set my fork down. Not exactly. The money has already been donated in Tyler's name to the Children's Hope Foundation. It's gone. The room went silent. Dad's knife froze mid-cut. Mom's smile vanished. Patricia blinked, confusion giving way to disbelief. You donated it, she whispered. Yes, I said softly. To help children like Tyler, children fighting for their lives while their families actually stand beside them. Mom's voice trembled. You had no right. I had every right, I interrupted, because I was the only one who cared when it mattered. As their faces turned pale, I realized the real fight hadn't even begun yet. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, steady, judgmental, almost loud in the silence that followed my words. Mom was the first to move. Her fork clattered against the plate as she rose, her face trembling between anger and disbelief. Jennifer, how could you? That money was supposed to stay in the family. It was meant to help us rebuild after this tragedy. Rebuild, I repeated, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. You mean fund Patricia's dream wedding while your grandson's grave is still fresh? Dad's face turned red. Watch your tone, young lady. You may be grieving, but that doesn't give you the right to throw accusations at your family. My family? I laughed softly, though there was no humor in the sound. You mean the same family who couldn't spare one afternoon to say goodbye to a dying child? Patricia pushed her chair back, tears already forming. You're being cruel, Jenny. I didn't want to make things harder for anyone. The party was already paid for, and Mom said, Enough, I interrupted sharply. You all made your choices. You chose celebration over compassion. Don't rewrite it now. For the first time, silence felt heavy, like guilt had finally found its way into the room. Dad rubbed his temples. You've made a mistake. Once the donation clears, there's no way to get that money back. I know, I said. That's the point. Patricia slammed her hands on the table. You had no right to do this. That money could have changed my life. My voice stayed calm, too calm. It already did. It changed it by showing you what your priorities really are. Mom gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. How dare you speak to us like this after everything we've done for you? I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You're right, Mom. You did everything for me, except be there when it mattered. Their faces blurred as I turned toward the door. The air in the room was thick with things unsaid, but I didn't care anymore. As I stepped outside, the cool desert wind hit my face like a slap, sharp and cleansing. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. But peace never lasts long, not when your family decides that revenge is a form of love. 3 days passed after that dinner, but the echo of it stayed with me. Their shocked faces, my mother's trembling voice, the way my father's jaw clenched as if holding back years of control slipping away. By the 4th day, the calls began. First it was Mom, her voice soft, pretending concern. Jennifer, I think we both overreacted. You're hurting, I understand that. But Tyler's fund wasn't yours to give away without consulting us. I said nothing. An hour later, Dad called. His tone was firm, clipped, professional, like he was talking to a client who'd breached a contract. We'll be speaking with our attorney. The donation might be reversible under family estate laws. I suggest you prepare yourself. I hung up before he could finish. That evening, Patricia texted. The message glowed on my phone screen. You've ruined everything. Brad's furious. Mom and Dad blame me for not convincing you. I hope you're happy. Happy. The word hit harder than it should have. Happiness wasn't even in my vocabulary anymore. I turned my phone off and sat in the darkness of Tyler's room. His nightlight still glowed softly, shaped like a small triceratops. I hadn't been able to bring myself to unplug it. They didn't understand. None of them did. The money wasn't gone. It had simply transformed. It had become something meaningful, something alive. I had received an email that morning from the Children's Hope Foundation confirming the establishment of the Tyler Blake Memorial Fund, a program designed to provide treatment grants for children fighting leukemia. There was even a short note from one of the coordinators. Your son's story inspired our team. His courage will now give others a chance at life. For the first time in months, I cried, not from grief, but from relief. Tyler's fight hadn't been in vain. His memory had purpose now. But peace was short-lived. The next morning, a letter arrived from my father's lawyer. Legal threats. Demands to disclose financial documents. Words like mismanagement, emotional instability, improper authorization filled the page. They were painting me as unfit, the grieving mother who had acted irrationally. I folded the letter neatly and placed it on the counter. Then I smiled for the first time in days. If they wanted to fight, they were about to learn that grief can turn into steel. And the person who helped me sharpen that steel was someone my parents never expected to see again. 2 days after the lawyer's letter arrived, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something in me said to answer. Jennifer Blake, a woman's voice asked, calm but firm. Yes. This is Grace Carter, your aunt, your father's sister. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Aunt Grace hadn't spoken to my parents in over 15 years. The last time I'd seen her, I was barely 20. She'd been the only one in the family who didn't pretend everything was perfect, and the only one my parents called trouble. I heard about Tyler, she said softly, and about what your parents are trying to do. They called me yesterday, wanted me to talk some sense into you. I almost laughed. Of course they did. Well, she continued, they didn't expect that I'd call you instead. When she arrived the next morning, it was like a breath of reality entering a house that had been suffocating in grief and anger. Grace was older, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun, but her eyes, sharp and kind, hadn't changed a bit. She hugged me tightly. You look like hell, she said bluntly. I feel worse. We sat in the kitchen and I told her everything, the funeral, the phone calls, the dinner, the donation, and the threats. Grace listened without interrupting, her fingers wrapped around a mug of black coffee. When I finished, she let out a long sigh. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I'm not. Your parents always cared more about appearances than people. You just exposed it in a way they can't hide anymore. I stared at her. They're trying to make me look unstable. They want the charity to reverse the donation. Grace leaned back, her expression calm but calculating. Then it's time someone reminded them what integrity looks like. I still have contacts in Phoenix, lawyers, reporters, people who don't scare easily. You've done nothing wrong, Jennifer. But if they want a war, we'll fight it with truth. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of strength return. Not the brittle kind fueled by anger, but the solid kind born from knowing I wasn't alone anymore. Grace smiled. Your parents think they're dealing with the same quiet girl who used to obey them. Let's show them how wrong they are. Neither of us knew then that exposing the truth would unleash something far darker than family greed. Grace stayed for the weekend. The house, once a place of silence and sorrow, began to breathe again. She moved through it like she'd always belonged there, watering my plants, opening curtains I hadn't touched in weeks, filling the air with the smell of strong coffee and quiet determination. On Saturday morning, we sat together in Tyler's room. The dinosaur posters still covered the walls, and his favorite Triceratops plush sat neatly on the pillow. Grace picked it up gently. He named it Harold, didn't he? She asked with a faint smile. Herbert, I corrected. He said it was a gentle dinosaur. She nodded, her eyes glistening. He was such a good kid. When I heard what your parents did, skipping the funeral, asking for money, I wasn't shocked. Saddened, yes, but not shocked. Your father was always more interested in his image than his integrity. I looked down, tracing the edge of Tyler's blanket. They said I was being selfish, that donating the money dishonored him. Grace shook her head. No. You honored him by turning pain into purpose. That's something they'll never understand. Her words felt like a balm, soothing wounds I hadn't realized were still bleeding. That evening, while I was preparing dinner, Grace handed me a small box. I found this while cleaning out my things last year. Thought you should have it. Inside was an old photograph, me at 8 years old, sitting on Grace's lap at a family picnic. My parents stood in the background, already looking like strangers. Grace had scribbled something on the back. Be kind, but never let kindness make you silent. I looked up at her. You wrote this years ago? She smiled. Your mother used to tell me I was too outspoken. Maybe she was right. But sometimes silence does more damage than words ever could. The rest of the night passed peacefully. For the first time in months, I slept without nightmares. But peace never lasts long in families like ours. The next morning, Grace was reading the newspaper at my kitchen table when her expression changed. She folded the paper slowly and looked up. They went to the press, she said. Your parents. My heart stopped. What do you mean? They've given an interview. They're saying you donated the money because you're unstable, that grief has made you unfit to manage anything. They're calling it a family tragedy caused by mental breakdown. For a second, the room spun around me. Grace stood, her voice steady. Then it's time to tell your side, Jennifer. The truth deserves a louder voice. But neither of us expected how loud that truth would become or how many people would hear it. Grace was right. The truth needed a voice. But I hadn't expected it to come so quickly or so loudly. By noon, my phone was flooded with messages, old friends, coworkers, even strangers tagging me in posts. My parents' interview had gone live on a local news site. The headline read, Grieving Mother Donates Child's Trust Fund Amid Mental Health Concerns. The article was brutal. They'd painted me as unstable, claiming I had suffered a breakdown following her son's passing and had made impulsive decisions under emotional distress. My father was quoted saying, We love Jennifer dearly, but she's not thinking clearly. We only want what's best for her. Grace read the article over my shoulder, her jaw tightening. They're not just protecting their image anymore, she said. They're destroying yours. I sat there, staring at the screen, numb. They hadn't even said Tyler's name properly. The reporter had called him Taylor. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about the trust fund anymore. It was about power, control, and public humiliation. Grace placed a comforting hand on my arm. We fight back the right way, with facts, not fury. I'm calling an old friend of mine at Channel 7. She's a journalist who actually cares about the truth. Within an hour, Grace had arranged an interview. The journalist, a woman named Lydia Chen, arrived at my house that evening. She was calm, empathetic, and unlike the others, she actually listened. We sat in Tyler's room. I told her everything. The missed funeral, the phone calls, the dinner, the donation, the threats, the lies. She recorded every word. When we finished, Lydia looked at me with quiet resolve. People need to hear this. You're not unstable, Jennifer. You're a mother who did something beautiful in the face of tragedy. I promise I'll tell your story right. For the first time in days, I felt something shift, not relief, but courage. That night, Grace and I sat together in the living room, the soft glow of the TV reflecting on our faces. We did the right thing, she said softly. I nodded, but a small voice inside me whispered otherwise, because I knew my parents wouldn't stop here. They never did. And I was right because the next morning someone tried to break into my house. The sound that woke me wasn't loud, just a faint creak, like the soft protest of an old door hinge. At first, I thought I was dreaming. But then I heard it again, slow, deliberate footsteps coming from the kitchen. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Grace had stayed in the guest room across the hall. I tiptoed toward her door, knocking softly. She was already awake. You heard it too, she whispered. I nodded. Together, we moved quietly down the hallway. The only light came from the night lamp in Tyler's room, casting long shadows on the walls. The footsteps stopped. Then came the metallic rattle of the back door handle. Someone was definitely there. Grace motioned for me to stay behind her. Despite her age, she moved with quiet precision, grabbing the fireplace poker from the stand near the living room. We edged closer to the kitchen. The back door stood slightly ajar, cold air seeping in. Then, a sudden movement. A shadow slipped through the opening. Hey! Grace shouted, swinging the poker with surprising strength. The intruder stumbled back, knocking over a chair before darting out the door and disappearing into the darkness. We stood there, breathless. My hands shook so violently, I nearly dropped my phone as I dialed 911. When the police arrived, they searched the property. No one was found, but the back gate had been forced open. One of the officers, a kind-eyed man named Officer Reynolds, looked at me carefully. "Do you have any reason to believe someone would want to scare you?" I hesitated. "My parents have been upset with me. Things got public." He nodded slowly. "Well, whoever it was didn't come to rob you. They left too fast. This feels like intimidation." Grace crossed her arms. "Then they picked the wrong women to intimidate." After the police left, the house felt heavier, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the fear. Grace sat at the kitchen table, staring at the door. "They're desperate," she said quietly. "People only act like this when they're losing control." I sat across from her, clutching Tyler's stuffed triceratops like a shield. "If they think fear will silence me, they don't know me at all." Grace smiled faintly. "That's the spirit. But if we're going to fight back, we'll need proof, something undeniable." I looked at her, realization dawning. "Then we find it." And the first clue appeared the very next day, hidden inside a letter I was never supposed to read. The letter arrived the next morning, tucked between bills and flyers. Nothing special at first glance. But when I saw the handwriting, my heart stopped. It was my father's. I hesitated before opening it, half expecting more threats or cold legal jargon. But instead, inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, uneven, rushed. "Jennifer, you've made things worse than they needed to be. We tried to protect you, but you left us no choice. If you want this to end quietly, meet me at the old lake house tonight at 8. Come alone. Dad." I read it 3 times, my pulse quickening. Grace, standing nearby, noticed my expression. "What is it?" I handed her the letter. She read it silently, then exhaled slowly. "This isn't about reconciliation. This is bait." I nodded. "I know. But maybe that's exactly what we need." Grace frowned. "Jennifer, no. If they've already stooped to intimidation, there's no telling what they might do next. You can't go alone." "I won't," I said. "But I have to go." We spent the rest of the day planning carefully. Grace contacted Officer Reynolds, the policeman from the night before. He agreed to send a patrol car near the lake that evening, just in case. As dusk fell, I drove toward the lake house, the same one where my family used to spend summers when I was a child. Back then, it had been full of laughter and sunlight. Now, the trees loomed like sentinels, and the house itself looked like a ghost of what it once was. I parked a few meters away and waited, my hands gripping the steering wheel. At exactly 8 p.m., headlights appeared in the distance. My father's car. He stepped out slowly, scanning the shadows. His expression was unreadable, not angry, not sad, just cold. "Jennifer," he called. "Let's talk." I stepped out, phone recording in my pocket, heart hammering. "What do you want, Dad?" He sighed, almost theatrically. "You've humiliated this family. The donation, the press, it all ends tonight." I met his eyes. "You're right. It does end tonight." Because behind him, hidden by the trees, Grace's car engine hummed softly. We weren't alone after all. And when my father finally realized that it was already too late, the wind from the lake was cold and sharp, carrying the faint scent of pine and decay. The moonlight stretched across the rippling water, silver and still, casting long shadows between us. My father stood near the porch, his hands in his coat pockets, his expression unreadable. "You didn't have to bring this to the media, Jennifer," he said finally. "You've humiliated your own family." "My family?" I echoed. "You mean the same people who abandoned their grandson's funeral to host a party? The ones who called me unstable instead of grieving?" He flinched, just slightly. "You don't understand what you've done. That money wasn't just for Tyler. It was meant to keep this family's name secure. You've jeopardized everything." I took a step forward. "No, Dad. You jeopardized everything the moment you turned my son's death into an inconvenience. For a moment, his mask slipped. I saw anger flicker, not the fiery kind, but the cold, dangerous kind that came from control being challenged. You always were emotional, he said bitterly. Your mother and I tried to raise you better than this, to be strong, to think logically. But instead, you turned into this sentimental liability. I felt my throat tighten. Strong? I whispered. You call it strength to ignore pain? To erase a child because he doesn't fit your perfect image? He exhaled sharply, looking away toward the lake. It doesn't matter what you think anymore. You'll retract your statement to the press, and we'll handle the rest. The foundation can quietly return the funds. You'll tell them you were confused. I laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. You really think I'd lie for you again? He turned back toward me, his eyes dark. If you don't, Jennifer, you'll regret it. I can still make things very difficult for you. That was when the faint sound of a camera shutter clicked from the trees behind him. My father froze, eyes narrowing. Grace stepped out from the shadows, holding her phone up, recording. Already did, she said coolly. Say hello to accountability. My father's face went pale. Grace, you don't know what you're doing. Oh, I do, she replied. I'm doing what you should have done years ago, standing up to you. The air between them was electric, years of buried truth finally breaking the surface. But what none of us saw that night was the second car parked just beyond the trees, engine still running. The sound of the second engine idling sent a chill through me. It was faint but steady, too deliberate to be random. My father turned toward the noise, confusion crossing his face for the first time that night. Grace caught my eye, her instinct sharp. She mouthed, "Stay back." The headlights flickered on, blinding for a moment. Then the door opened, and someone stepped out, my mother. She looked different. Her usual polished perfection was gone. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red from crying, but her expression was still cold, rigid, the same mask she'd worn my entire life. "Harold," she called to my father, her voice trembling. "Stop this. You're making it worse." He spun toward her, anger rising like smoke. "You shouldn't be here, Margaret." She took a hesitant step forward. "Neither should you. She's your daughter, not your enemy." Grace and I exchanged a look. This wasn't what we expected. My mother, the woman who had stood silent through every lie, was finally speaking. "Margaret," my father warned, his tone low. "You don't understand what's at stake." "Oh, I do," she said, her voice breaking. "I've understood for years. You've controlled everything, the money, the narrative, even our grief. I stayed quiet because I thought it kept the peace, but it only made us smaller." He laughed, short and bitter. "You're blaming me for her mistakes?" "She didn't make a mistake," my mother snapped. "She did what we should have done. She honored our grandson." For the first time in my life, I saw my father falter. His jaw clenched, his hands trembled slightly. "You think this changes anything?" he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Grace stepped closer, her phone still recording. "It changes everything. The truth always does." My mother turned toward me, her eyes soft for once. "Jennifer, I'm sorry. For all of it." The words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't know if I could forgive her, but hearing them, finally, cracked something open inside me. Then, suddenly, the sound of crunching gravel echoed through the night. Another set of lights appeared down the road, bright, fast, coming straight toward us. Grace's expression shifted instantly. "That's not the police," she said. My father's eyes widened. "What did you do, Jennifer?" I turned toward the approaching car, dread rising in my throat. Because whoever was behind that wheel wasn't there to talk. They were there to end this for good. The oncoming car's headlights grew brighter, cutting through the darkness like blades. I barely had time to react before the tires screeched, the sound splitting the silence, like a scream. Grace grabbed my arm and yanked me back just as the car swerved hard, missing us by inches. It spun wildly on the gravel before coming to a halt near the lake's edge, engines still running, headlights pointing toward the water. My father shouted, "What the hell?" and ran toward it. My mother followed a few steps behind, calling his name. The driver's door opened slowly. Out stepped Daniel, Patricia's fiancé. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he tried to steady himself. "Daniel?" I gasped. "What are you doing here?" He looked at me with hollow eyes, then turned to my father. "You said you'd handle it quietly. You promised." My father froze. "What are you talking about?" Grace narrowed her eyes. "You knew about this?" Daniel's voice cracked. "He told me to scare her, to make her back down. But now it's on the news, and Patricia, she's losing everything because of this." The words hit like a thunderclap. I turned toward my father, disbelief twisting my stomach. "You sent him to threaten me?" My father's jaw tightened. "I told him to talk to you. Not this." Grace stepped closer. "So, you admit it? You orchestrated the break-in." For a moment, no one spoke. The truth hung in the air like smoke, thick, suffocating. My mother's hand covered her mouth. "Harold, please tell me that's not true." But he didn't answer. His silence said everything. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, pacing frantically. "You've ruined us all." Patricia's parents pulled out of the wedding. Reporters are calling nonstop. Everyone knows. I took out my phone, still recording. "Keep talking, Daniel." He looked up, realizing what he'd just done. "Oh God." Grace's voice was calm but firm. "You both need to leave. Now." Daniel stumbled back toward the car, but before anyone could move, the gravel under his feet gave way. The car shifted, sliding closer to the lake's edge. "Daniel," my mother screamed. He tried to grab the door handle, but it was too late. The car rolled forward, its tires sinking into the muddy bank before plunging into the dark water below. The splash was deafening, and as the headlights vanished beneath the surface, I realized one secret had just drowned, but the rest were still alive. The water swallowed the car in seconds. The sound of metal groaning beneath the surface echoed across the lake, then faded into an eerie stillness. For a moment, none of us moved. The moonlight shimmered over the ripples, the only proof that anything had just happened. My mother screamed Daniel's name and rushed toward the water, but Grace grabbed her arm before she could jump in. "Stop. It's too deep." I stumbled forward, staring at the dark waves. The headlights beneath the surface flickered once, twice, then went out completely. My father stood frozen, his face pale and unreadable. For the first time in my life, he looked afraid. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered. "I didn't mean for this." Grace cut him off. "Save it, Harold. You've done enough." She turned toward me. "Call the police again. Now." My hands shook as I dialed. The operator's calm voice felt unreal as I explained what happened. Within minutes, red and blue lights appeared in the distance, sirens echoing through the woods. While the rescue team worked, divers plunged into the icy water. I watched from the shore, my breath coming in shallow bursts. One of the officers approached. "Ma'am, please step back." But I couldn't. My eyes stayed fixed on the water, on the spot where the car had gone under, where the truth had finally surfaced, but at a terrible cost. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw my father step backward toward the trees. Grace noticed it too. "Harold," she barked. "Don't you dare walk away." He stopped, turning slowly. "You don't understand, Grace. None of you do. This family was built on sacrifice. Sometimes you have to do ugly things to survive." Grace's voice trembled with anger. "You call this survival? You've destroyed everyone who ever loved you." He looked past her, straight at me. "And you, Jennifer. You destroyed the only thing I had left." Before I could answer, the divers shouted from the lake. They'd found the car. But as they pulled it closer to shore, one of them waved frantically. "There's no one inside." The words froze me in place. Grace turned toward the water, disbelief in her eyes. "What do you mean no one inside?" The officer shook his head. "The car's empty." And in that single moment, I realized Daniel hadn't drowned. He had vanished. The words, "the car's empty," kept echoing in my head like a broken record. The divers searched again, diving back under the black water, their flashlights slicing through the darkness, but there was no trace of Daniel. The rescue team worked for over an hour before finally calling it off. Officer Reynolds approached me, his expression grave. "There's no sign of a body, ma'am. Either he got out before the car sank, or someone helped him." Grace's eyes narrowed. "Someone helped him," she said. "That man didn't just vanish." My father stood off to the side, silent, his coat drenched in cold mist. He looked older suddenly, his posture collapsed. My mother sat on the ground, sobbing quietly into her hands. I turned toward Reynolds. "What happens now?" He hesitated. "We'll start a search at dawn. But if Daniel is alive, he won't stay hidden for long. He'll need help, money, shelter, maybe a contact." Grace's voice was sharp. "And I bet we all know who'd give him that." My father didn't move. He just stared at the water, his reflection trembling in the dark ripples. "Dad," I said, stepping closer. "If you know where he is, tell the truth. Please." He didn't answer. Grace crossed her arms. "He's protecting him." "Of course he is. Harold can't stand losing control, even now." Finally, my father looked up, his eyes hollow. "You think you know everything, Grace, but you don't. There are things none of you understand. Things that go back decades." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" He shook his head slowly. "It doesn't matter anymore. None of this was supposed to happen." Before I could ask more, the paramedics approached, helping my mother to her feet. The police began to tape off the area, marking the edge of the lake with yellow lines that glowed faintly under the moonlight. Grace placed a hand on my shoulder. "We should go, Jennifer. There's nothing more to do tonight." I nodded numbly, glancing one last time at the still water. Somewhere beneath that surface, secrets were stirring, and Daniel was still out there. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. My father remained by the shore, a lonely silhouette under the cold light, staring into the lake as if it might speak back. And later that night, it did, because when I checked my email before bed, I found a message sent from Daniel's account. The email arrived at 11:42 p.m. The sender's name flashed across my screen. Daniel Harris. My stomach dropped. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The subject line read, "You don't know the truth." Grace had gone to bed hours earlier, but I was still awake, sitting in the dim glow of my laptop. My hands trembled as I clicked the message open. "Jennifer, if you're reading this, then you already know I'm not dead. Don't call the police. It won't help you. Nothing will, unless you understand what your father's hiding. You think the trust fund was just about money? It wasn't. The money wasn't meant for Tyler. It was meant to cover something up, something your father did years ago. Meet me where it all started, the old construction site near the hospital. Tomorrow, 9 p.m. Come alone." I stared at the words, heart pounding in my chest. Could this really be from him? The email was sent just 30 minutes earlier. No attachments, no clues, just that cryptic message. I reread it again and again, every sentence twisting deeper into my nerves. What could my father possibly have done? And why involve Tyler's trust fund? My first instinct was to wake Grace, but something stopped me. If Daniel was telling the truth, it meant my father's lies went even deeper than we thought, and if he wasn't, then someone else had access to his account. Either way, I needed to know. I typed a quick reply. "Daniel, if this is really you, prove it. Tell me something only you'd know." Seconds passed. Then minutes. Nothing. Finally, around midnight, my laptop pinged again. A new email appeared, no subject line this time. It contained just one sentence. Tyler's favorite dinosaur was Herbert. My blood ran cold. Only Daniel, and I knew that. That was the proof. He was alive. But something about it felt wrong, the phrasing, the tone. It didn't sound like Daniel at all. I shut my laptop slowly, my reflection flickering in the dark screen. If he was alive, then what game was he playing? And worse, who else was playing it with him? The next evening, I drove toward the old construction site just outside town, the one near the hospital where Tyler had spent his final months. The road was empty, the air thick with fog. I could see the faint outline of cranes and half-finished buildings in the distance, long abandoned and silent. Grace had begged me not to go. "This could be a trap, Jennifer," she'd said that morning. "If Daniel's really alive, he's dangerous now, desperate. I have to know," I'd told her. "If my father did something, I can't keep living in the dark." Now, as I parked near the rusted fence, her words echoed in my head. I kept my headlights off, stepping out into the damp night. The smell of concrete dust and rain filled the air. I clutched my phone, the recording app already running. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but curiosity, or maybe closure, kept my feet moving forward. The site was eerily quiet, the metal beams groaning softly in the wind. I passed the old sign that read "Future of Healthcare, Blake Medical Wing, coming soon." My father's name. Of course. I stopped in front of what used to be the main office, now a hollow shell of glass and rust. That's when I heard it, a faint shuffle behind me. "Daniel?" I whispered. No answer. Then a voice came from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come alone." I turned sharply. A man stepped out, not Daniel, but someone I hadn't seen in years. My breath caught. "Uncle Robert," I said. "You?" He looked thinner, his eyes hollow, his face marked by exhaustion. "You were never supposed to find out, Jennifer. Your father told me he'd handle it quietly." "Handle what?" I demanded. "What did he do?" Robert hesitated, glancing around nervously. "This place, it was never meant to be finished. The foundation money, it wasn't just Tyler's. It came from other accounts, donations your father redirected after the accident. He used your son's trust to hide it." The truth hit like a physical blow. "He laundered money through Tyler's fund?" Robert nodded weakly. "He thought if the project never opened, no one would notice. But Daniel found the records. That's why your father wanted him silenced." My stomach twisted. "And now Daniel's using it against him." Robert's gaze darkened. "No, Jennifer. Daniel's not the only one." Because when I turned around, I saw a figure watching us from the scaffolding, and it wasn't Daniel. The figure on the scaffolding stood perfectly still, a dark silhouette against the fog-drenched night. My pulse quickened as the beam of a broken floodlight flickered, illuminating part of his face. It wasn't Daniel. It was my father. "Dad." My voice trembled. "What are you doing here?" Robert swore under his breath. "You followed me, didn't you?" My father climbed down the metal frame with surprising steadiness for a man his age. When his shoes hit the gravel, the silence around us deepened. "I told you to stay away from this place," he said, his tone low, controlled, the same tone he'd used my entire life when hiding something. "You knew I'd come," I replied. "Daniel emailed me." He smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "Of course he did. He always was a coward, hiding behind words." Robert stepped forward. "Harold, it's over. She knows everything." My father's gaze shifted sharply to him. "No, Robert. She thinks she knows everything." He turned back to me. "You've been chasing ghosts, Jennifer. Daniel wasn't the threat. He was the distraction." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" He sighed, almost as if tired of pretending. "I didn't send Daniel after you. Patricia did." The name struck like a slap. "Patricia? My sister?" He nodded slowly. "She wanted the trust money. Thought if she exposed me, she'd get control of what was left. But Daniel fell in love with you instead of following her plan. That's why she turned on him. That's why he ran." I felt my knees weaken. "No, you're lying." Robert looked torn. "Jennifer, I didn't know that part." My father stepped closer, his shadow swallowing mine. "I tried to protect this family. From the truth. From Patricia. From you." I stepped back, trembling. "Protect us? You destroyed us." He reached into his coat pocket. For a second, I thought I saw something metallic glint under the light. "Dad, don't. Stay where you are," he barked. "You have no idea what's really at stake here." Then, from behind us, a familiar voice cut through the air, calm, measured, and cold. "Actually," it said, "she knows now." We turned toward the sound. Daniel stood at the edge of a site, soaked, alive, and holding a gun. And the barrel wasn't aimed at my father, it was aimed at me. The air turned heavy. The faint hum of the cranes above us faded into silence as Daniel stepped closer, the gun trembling slightly in his hand. Rain began to fall, each drop slicing through the tension like glass. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Put it down. Please."
He shook his head.
"You don't understand, Jennifer. I tried to protect you from him." His eyes flicked toward my father. "He killed Tyler." The world stopped moving. "What?" I breathed. My father's face hardened. "That's a lie." Daniel's voice cracked.
"No, it's not."
"Tyler's treatment was never meant to fail. Your father cut the funding to hide the missing money. He told the doctors to postpone the procedure until new resources arrived. But they never did." My chest tightened, tears blurring my vision. You let him die?" My father didn't answer. His silence was worse than any confession. Daniel stepped closer, lowering the gun slightly. "He buried it all under that construction project. That's why I found the documents. That's why he tried to have me silenced." Robert raised his hands slowly. "Daniel, listen to me." But Daniel's voice trembled with rage. "No one listened before. No one cared what happened to that little boy." I took a step forward, hands raised. "Daniel, please. This isn't the way. If you do this, you'll lose yourself." He looked at me, really looked, and for a moment, the anger in his eyes softened. Then my father moved. Too fast. He lunged toward Daniel. A shot rang out. The sound tore through the night like thunder. Daniel staggered backward, the gun clattering to the ground. My father froze, shock written across his face. Robert rushed forward, grabbing the weapon. I dropped to my knees beside Daniel. "No, no, no." He smiled weakly, blood staining his shirt. "You know the truth now," he whispered. "Don't let him bury it again." And then he was gone. My father fell to his knees across from me, his hands trembling. I didn't mean to, but I didn't listen. I picked up Daniel's phone from the ground. It was still recording. Every word, every confession, captured. For once, the truth couldn't be buried. Weeks later, the headlines read, "Businessman Harold Blake arrested in trust fund fraud and medical negligence case." I stood at Tyler's grave, a cold breeze brushing against my face. "It's over," I whispered. "You can rest now." And for the first time in years, I meant it. If you were Jennifer, would you have confronted the truth, or protected your family's secrets? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Follow for more gripping stories like this. And don't miss what happens after justice is served.